A long time ago, precisely 2 months ago, Blizzard came out with the announcement of 9.1.5 with its content preview. In this content preview, we came to know that Blizzard was pulling the so-called ripcord to the whole Covenant limitation system. You would have now been able, in the upcoming patch, to freely respec and move around between Covenants with no restriction whatsoever. So initially, of course, this bit of news was received very positively, if not, of course, for the cover of frustration that people had, knowing that, as usual, it took Blizzard a year, even more if we count the complaints from the beta, to apply a change that everyone wanted since the start. But once you took the change in a vacuum on its own, it was, of course, a great change. Now, as soon as people started metabolizing this change and realizing what it meant, some other questions came around. For example, okay, great, now I can just move away from my Necrolord and I can play all the other 3 Covenants, but there is a problem. The problem is that I have been Necrolord since the release of the expansion. This means I have 0 specific followers for the 3 different Covenants. I have no buildings in the 3 Covenant Sanctums of the other Covenants I have not been part of so far. I have also not done any bit of story for the 3 different Covenants. So, sure, we're gonna get the ability to be able to play these Covenants, but what's gonna happen to basically all of the prerequisite grinding of story and systems that you have to go through before you can actually play the Covenants just like you have been able to play your main one, which took you a while to get to that point. And Blizzard was coming to that announcement 2 months ago very prepared, because they came out with several changes, quality of life changes that would have made the grinding and the catch-up for these systems much faster. For example, you can now trade anima to your alts, to your other characters, and even to yourself, to other Covenants, because the item you can buy now is bind on account. For example, you could be on your main Covenant right now, buy 50,000 anima worth of items, and then respec to Ventir and dump all of that 50,000 anima to Ventir. And the conversion of anima is even 1-to-1. You spend 1,000 anima to get a 1,000 anima item, so you don't even lose anything to do this. Then they were also announcing, for example, that the Mo introductory questline was completely skippable. In 9.1.5 they announced that there is going to be an item you can buy, which is going to set your renown with whatever Covenant to 40. So that's essentially a 40 renown skip, which is of course the cap of renown of 9.0. That's when the renown was increased from 40 to 80 in 9.1, so essentially they allow you to skip the first part of the expansion. Other nice and welcome additions, like being able to use cosmetic unlocks from any Covenant while being affiliated to any Covenant. So you can now be in full-on Necrolord set while playing Kyrian, for example. And other minor, but still rather welcome removal of annoyances, like the removal of Conduit Energy, for example. The endlessly repeatable Torghast now, constantly giving you full value on your Soul Cinders and Soul Ash, as well as being able to scrap your old legendaries to gain back 100% of the Soul Cinders and Soul Ash you spent. So back then it looked like we were set for a pretty nice and fast and easy way to level up and expand on all of the other Covenants you might have left behind. But, however, this is what we have to talk about today, because amongst these very helpful additions to skip more of the old content and being able to get where you want at the end game faster, there was also the ability to skip the campaign. So if you have ever completed the full 9.0 campaign on any character, you would have been able to skip that entire campaign on any other character. This would have also allowed you to keep all of the renown you would have been able to gain by doing that campaign, for example, and also, of course, skipping the campaign would have still allowed you to get into Cortia, the 9.1 campaign. So, the purpose of the video for today is the news that the ability to skip the 9.0 Covenant campaign has been removed from patch 9.1.5. Now, the reason why the video needs to be made is because a lot of misinformation has already happened. A lot of people are getting confused about this. What does this mean? Does this mean that we will be able to switch covenants, but to even be able to play them as a decent level, we have to go back and redo every single one of these campaigns? So, not quite. If you want, the TLDR is that nothing changes except for your ability to gather pets, toys, and mounts and transmog appearances and whatnot of these covenants if you don't want to bother with the story. The long explanation is that amongst the announcements made by Blizzard for 9.1.5, there was also the one that said that you would no longer need to complete the campaign to reach max renown. So back then, and by back then I mean now, to be able to reach max renown you need to complete the story. You are able to catch up on renown, you're able to get renown from dungeons, from emissaries, from daily quests, etc, etc, up until the point of your campaign story progression. You can't go higher than that, you can't go higher than the state of your campaign. So that point went somewhat under the radar because everyone just assumed it was useless. If you can completely skip the campaign in 9.1.5, then who cares? However, now that we have discovered that this whole skip never existed in the first place, this tiny little announcement makes a lot of sense again. This means that you don't care about following the campaign to be able to reach 80 renown. This means you can simply sit, for example, in Mythic Plus, or sit doing dailies, emissaries, or even Torghast, which does give renown to get to 80 renown. It is no longer tied to the progression of your story, which means that even though you will not be able to skip the campaign for free, like it was previously thought, you're not gonna get stuck in your character progression. The same goes for the Soulbind, because if there is another thing that is tied to character power in the campaign, is being able to unlock the Soulbind, progressing your story. What you're going to be able to do is what you're seeing basically in this video. As you reroll as a fresh renown level 1 to a different covenant, it's only going to take you about 5 minutes before you have full access of your 3 different soulbinds being unlocked. You have done nothing of the story and you're going to get them immediately. So you won't have to engage at all in the story if you don't want to, if you still cared about character power, which is increasing your renown or getting your soulbinds unlocked. So essentially, if you're getting your renown anyways, you're getting your soulbinds anyways, and you're able to get into Kortia anyways, what does this leave the original campaign with? The only things that are left in the original campaign are the fact that, number one, of course, the vendors. All of the stuff that is sold by the Covenant vendor, the things that you have unlocked, even up to now, even up to recently, the Renown 77, I think, full transmog set, the extra mounts, etc, etc. Part of these rewards are also going to be limited essentially by your Covenant campaign progression, which means if you don't bother doing it, you're not going to be able to have access to these transmog sets essentially that require you to progress in the campaign. Not all of them, but a good amount of them, and also all of the transmog sets are going to be limited by your progression in the campaign. So that is one thing you're not going to be able to get if you choose to skip the campaign. The other part that is going to be perhaps a problem to some people is the fact that eventually, yes, you can get into Kortia, yes, you can get the whole grind with the Archivist Codex and whatnot can still be done regardless of your progression with the story, but eventually you will reach one chapter in the Kortia campaign, which is chapter 4, which requires you to have finished the original campaign. So if you have not completed the campaign, then you can't really progress in the Kortia campaign. This, however, if you think about it, is not too big of an issue, because the only ability you had to skip the 9.0 campaign was if you finished it in the first place at least once, which means if you finished it at least once, you would have still had the ability to start the Kortia campaign with that Covenant anyways. So even though it might sound bad at first, having to be stopped in the Kortia campaign progression, it doesn't really matter in the end, because to be able to have this campaign skip in the first place, you would have had to complete a 9.0 campaign anyways, which meant you would have had access to Kortia anyways, so it's not that bad. Now, we have to go back to the original question, however, which is why? What is the purpose of this change? Effectively, for people looking into character power and into knowing that they can go to sleep soundly at night, at the fact that they are not missing any power on their character, they are not missing anything they should put on their character because of this change. Nothing like this is going to happen. You're still getting your renown, you're still getting your soulbinds, and you're still getting your story progressions if you want to. However, the question is, why has it been changed to work like it does? Of course, at first glance, the obvious answer is that this change is effectively going to split into the character power and the very important stuff. It's going to detach it completely from the campaign and is now obtainable regardless of whether or not you decide to join into some RP, and then the other side, which is the campaign. And now it's completely devoid of any character power, it's completely devoid of any I really need to do this, it's something I need to put in my bucket list if I want to level up my alt eventually. Now it's completely gone, it's no longer here. So maybe it's still there because unironically there might be some people who enjoy to play this game as a solo RPG. Maybe it's unironically still available so people can continue in their story without having to worry on top of that about character power at the end of it. Perhaps that's the most logical explanation. I think in the end it's not really gonna hurt people, it's not gonna make their experience worse, and it's gonna give them a clear path into whether or not they want to chase just the power, the character power, or if they want to engage in some story progression. I do think the most annoying part of this change is going to be having to stare at all those exclamation marks whenever you enter your covenant, because they're gonna keep nagging you in continuing the story that you don't want to do. That's pretty much the main source of annoyance I can see with this change of system. Either way, I'm not too worried about it. I don't really care about progressing the campaign as I've already finished it on all 4 covenants with 4 different characters, so I didn't really plan to having to redo it. So whether or not I get to skip it with a single button like it should have worked, or rather like Blizzard announced it would, or if it's gonna work like this, which is you get to literally ignore it, then I'm still fine. I don't see too much of an issue for me. So what is left about this change is your point of view. What do you think of this change? Again, if you were worried in any way that this was going to make achieving the character power that you were seeking once you started re-rolling and changing all different covenants come Tuesday or Wednesday when the patch comes, this is effectively not really gonna change anything. So with this, we can stop here. As usual, thank you guys for watching the video. If you want to continue supporting the channel, you can leave a like on the video, you can comment down below, as well as, but only if your PC can run Crysis on ultra graphic settings, subscribe to this channel. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, oh no, all of these toys I won't be able to buy. Whatever will I do? Woe me.